Hey, welcome back to Nerd News Today. I'm Matthew, and in this episode we are continuing our look at the new Star Trek action figures from Playmates. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, I'm a huge action figure fan, so it is awesome to see that Playmates has gotten the license back, they're doing their own thing with it, and yeah, I am super excited about this. So previously now we looked at the Discovery figures and we looked at the classic Star Trek line, but today we are beaming into what was essentially my first Star Trek, and I think for many folks out there, their first Star Trek series as well, if they're in my same age group, and that would be action figures from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And man, these are the ones that I think really made me into toys as a kid, made me love Star Trek, so I've got a lot of high hopes, a lot of big expectations for these, and I certainly hope that they deliver. And who was in this very first wave representing TNG? Well, we have Captain Picard, we have Commander Riker, and we have Lieutenant Commander Data. 3 Starfleet staples. It makes sense that they'd be joining the very first wave. So yeah, I'm very happy about this so far. So let's talk first things first here about the packaging of these figures. Now, as I mentioned back when I did the Star Trek Discovery figure review, I was not too into this packaging at all. I felt that it was very, very boring. Really offered nothing of interest to me, super bland. I mean, nothing on the back of this packaging either. This is just like the least amount of work as possible put into it. But when we're talking about the TNG figures, well, yeah, bye-bye Discovery, because this has got it. This is what I'm talking about. And even more so when we compare it to the original Star Trek action figures from Playmates back in the 90s. And I happen to have one here of Guinan. A little beat up packaging, a little flimsy, but hey, it's gonna get the job done for this. But you guys can immediately see the fact that, yeah, there is a lot going on here. There's a lot of similarities. It's a straight up homage. So much goodness put into this packaging here that was taken from the original. I mean, you've got the Enterprise on top. You have the really cool starburst effect. It's a little bit more modernized on this Commander Riker here. Makes sense because, you know, this figure is like, what, almost 30 years apart from when this came out. So yeah, it makes sense that they're gonna look a little bit more modern, a little more contemporary style of graphics. But I mean, everything is there and it looks good. Like, this is what I wanted to see out of my Star Trek action figures. Now, it's hard not to notice that, of course, one of these is bigger than the other. This modern version here, it's a little bit smaller than what we're looking at here on this side with Guinan, but that's because, to be quite fair, you know, shelf space is a hot commodity these days. There's not really any commercial big box toy stores anymore. There's just Target and Walmarts and places like that. So, you know, shelf space is something you gotta kind of watch out for now as a company, so it makes sense they shrank things a little bit. But does it affect the quality? No, they jam-packed as much detail, as much nostalgia, goodness as they could into this. And likewise, I'm gonna say the exact same thing about the back of the figures here, because you can see, again, we have a lot of the stuff that's on the original here in the new one too. I mean, the same style, same colors. I mean, it really looks great here. One key difference is that the modern figure, you can see there are just photos of the actors who have figures, whereas on the original Guinan one here, you've got actual photos of the toys. So that part's just a fun little change. Nothing I'm gonna really take points off of, just an observation. But what we do get here is a list of what all the accessories are, which is totally like the original figure. And by the way, we did actually review on this channel the original Riker, so go ahead and check out our Trek Back Tuesdays playlist if you want to see the reviews of all the Star Trek figures we've done, including these original vintage figures. But yeah, the colors are the same. The accessory information is essentially the same. And yeah, we even get a bio again, just like we got on these original figures here. A little bit smaller, actually much smaller, but it's there, and we do have this QR code, which, by the way, the QR code just goes to Playmates Star Trek Toys website, so not really anything that cool, nothing of real interest there. But from the look, the feel, the design of these, like, this is exactly what I want. This is nostalgia in action figure form. This is perfect packaging for me. And, you know, it really pains me to say that, yeah, unfortunately, I do have to open this figure because it's a toy review, and this will be a pretty boring review if I didn't. So let's go ahead now and beam our figures out of the packaging and take a closer look at them from all angles. All right, and here are our TNG figures now out of the packaging. So we have on our left Data, in the middle Captain Picard, and on the right we have Commander Riker. So let's talk about likenesses here, because this was one of my concerns in previous videos. How are these TNG guys looking? Do they hold up? Do they look good? You know, for the most part, we got a few ups and downs, but I would say overall, definitely the strongest of the 3 different sets that we've seen so far. Definitely stronger than Discovery, and pretty close to what we saw at Wrath of Khan, but I think overall better. So let's start with who I think is the weakest head sculpt, and that would be Data. You know, I think of all of them, he looks the softest. And that's a word I've used a lot in these videos. And when I say that, I really just mean the features aren't quite there. They're kind of lacking. It's like we have the elements for what should make this likeness look good, but we're kind of just missing a few things that would sharpen it up. So Brent Spiner has a pretty big schnoz. That's like one of his very defining traits. This figure does have a long nose, but not quite that. And same thing with the mouth, it's not quite there. Eyes are okay, but the eyes are kind of plain too. But as far as like the defining features, it's like, it's ever so close, but it's not quite there all the way. I will say though, the color of his skin looks good because, Data's not just like a pure white. He actually is a little more golden. There's a little bit of yellow in that skin. And likewise with the lips, they got the lips right too. So color-wise, that is perfect. They nailed that. And the hair is also looking really solid in Data too. It's just the Brent Spiner likeness, it's close, but not quite there. Now, I think the second best likeness, I'm going to go to Riker over here. Riker has a very good Jonathan Frakes likeness. The one downside is he does have a little bit of paint slop on his nose, and that hopefully will magic eraser or scrub out, but for anybody out there who doesn't want to clean up anything like that, do be careful if you use a magic eraser, because it might just wipe out all the fine details on the spot, especially eyebrows and eyeballs. But yeah, there's a little bit of schmutz on his nose, but other than that, this looks like Jonathan Frakes. I'm pretty happy with this one. It's not my favorite version of Jonathan Frakes, but it's pretty solid. You have all the features I'm talking about that weren't quite there with Data. They're definitely much more defined on the Jonathan Frakes figure here. I just called him Jonathan Frakes figure. William Riker, what's the difference? But the beard looks good, the mouth looks good, eyes, nose, it's all there. And same thing with the hair too. They really captured that Riker hairdo, which I love. So Riker is very good. I'd give that a pretty high grade. But I think my highest grade absolutely goes to the captain himself, to Jean-Luc Picard. This figure, to me, screams Patrick Stewart, and it's kind of fun, because maybe it's just they're better at doing older characters, because I thought the Wrath of Khan, Ricardo Montalban Khan figure was excellent, and likewise this Picard, really great. I mean, they did a really wonderful job sculpting the details in there, and not only sculpting, but also using a little bit of paint to highlight it, like you can see in his brow, especially with his hair. They did a really great job painting that hair. They kept it really simple, by the way, on the topic of his hair, because just basically some painted strands, but it actually works. It really does fill that mental gap for you of what hair looks like on Patrick Stewart. But yeah, the cheeks, the nose especially, looks great. The lips, the mouth, the chin, the eyes, the depth of the eyes, because that's the thing too, is Patrick Stewart does have kind of a weird face to work with. He has a really deep set eyes, and that can throw off a lot of sculptors, but the team over at Varner Studios, they absolutely nailed it. And really, when I'm talking noses too, I mentioned Brent has his nose. Patrick Stewart also has a pretty big schnoz, and his schnoz on camera is one of those ones that like flattens out from certain angles, but as soon as he turns his head, it suddenly gets like enormous and very angular. And they did it perfectly with Patrick Stewart, but with Data, with Brent Spiner, not quite there. So maybe you guys can see what I'm talking about now a little bit more from this angle. But overall, that Patrick Stewart, they nailed it. That's absolutely nailed it. Beautiful job. Now let's talk articulation here, and let's use Data for this one, because after all, he is fully functional. So let's go ahead and talk about some Data right now. So the head is ball jointed, and this is stiff out of the box, but you get the idea. It's ball jointed, moves wonderfully, and likewise the shoulders are ball jointed too, so you can get some great range of motion with there. You've got single jointed elbows, which again, tight out of the box, but there you go. Our wrists can basically go left to right, and that's about the end of their articulation. Now we have no waist movement, nothing on the waist. So you can see I'm just holding his legs. That's kind of how I make it look like he's doing some waist movement. I guess you can kind of fake it that way, but there is no specific joint for moving the waist here. We do have some ball jointed legs though, with some pretty good articulation. In fact, here you go. You can finally, the pose we've all wanted to get Data into for years. Data can now do a crane kick. Finally. Living the dream. And we do have a foot that is ball jointed, but a little hard to move because of the way the pants are designed. So that joint is a little bit blocked here. Now, so overall, you're getting a lot of things you didn't get in the past, but we're missing some things that we did have in the past. So it's a little bit of give and take with these figures. Now, that said, I want to point out that Data is on a base, and all the guys we looked at so far have been on their bases. So that is one of the accessories that everybody comes with, which means we're talking accessories now. So they all come with a Starfleet insignia base, and this base is identical for every single figure in the line. That means the Wrath of Khan, that means Discovery, that means TNG. Now, in the old days, we had different bases for every line, more or less. Starfleet usually had the same one, but yeah, there was variety at least here and there, and there's no variety in these at all, so just a thing to be aware of. Now, since we have Data already out here, let's talk about Data and some of his accessories, because he comes with a bunch, and everybody this time around comes with a bunch, unlike the Discovery figures that only came with like very minimal, not really that exciting accessories. These guys have ones that are really cool, and also really harken back to those original Playmates figures. So Data comes with his tricorder right here, which really great job sculpting this. I love how this thing looks. It reminds me a lot of the original one. And speaking of, what I was talking about when I say it harkens back is that they all have handles. So Data's original figure, which we'll show you guys a little bit later, because of the way his hands were shaped, they put handles in all of his accessories to make sure you actually could hold them in his hands. So they're doing it again here, and yeah, it works. There you go. I mean, and it should be able to rotate as well. So there you go, yeah. You can actually get the tricorder on his hand just like you did back in the 90s. We also get this funky thing here. This is a diagnostic testing unit with monitor. So we had this in the original ones too, except the original one, it was orange, which was such a funny accessory. I kind of liked it, but yeah, we get this guy here. Again, both handles, so you can figure out how it works. And that's fine. It's really cool, because again, it came with the original figure. I like that they're doing that. Last but not least, we have a Type 2 phaser. This one, again, has that same little thing for his hand. So let's see how we can get this on his hand. I wonder if you actually could slide. Yeah, you actually can just slide it on. So it's kind of weird that they did it that way, but whatever. It is intended to just go on his hand, however you want to do it. I mean, you have a choice of how you're going to do it, but yeah, you get the phaser. So pretty good accessories. Let's move on to Commander Riker. Now, besides his base, Riker also has the phaser, which I want to mention, by the way, it is two-tone. This is just like the original toys too. You've got the base, which is one color, and then you got the beam, another color, just like the original toys. And let's see if we can get this actually in a hand. I don't know which hand is going to be his trigger hand, but let's just say this is the hand. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, I like how that looks a lot. Yep. It really does remind me a lot of the original toys too. And the fact that you can actually move this around a little bit more than the first version of Playmates that they did, with, getting him actually look like he's shooting it, yeah, I'm gonna give it some nice points. So good job with that, loving that. He also comes with this directional UV source, which is such a silly accessory, but again, I love that it's there, and it looks good. I wonder if it's actually the same mold or not from the original. And speaking of some real cool stuff from the originals, we have two little tiny things here. We have a small tricorder. I mean, I say small, but it's just the normal size. We have a tricorder right here, great looking sculpt, and we also have this pad. Nice job here. It reminds me a lot of the originals. I really think they reused the molds. We'll find out in a little bit. But speaking of, we also get this away team field kit. This right here is one of my favorite accessories of the original Riker. Probably is one of the things that made that toy one of my favorites, to be honest. Because I love the fact that he has this nice little thing here. When I saw photos of this thing too, by the way, I was wondering if it was going to actually work the way the original one did. And the answer is apparently yes. And what I mean by that is, let's see if we can do it. Oh, yes, the pop of success. This right here, you guys. It opens up. I love that it had all these little things here. And best of all, you can actually put stuff in it. So you can actually put the pad right in there, just like this, close it up. And now Riker is ready for his away mission. I don't know if he can actually hold it, unfortunately, because his hands are very small. But all right, there you go. No, he can hold it. He's off to go commute to work or possibly do an away team mission, either or. All right, so those are looking great too. Let's do our big finale now with Captain Picard. Now, just like Riker, Picard also comes with his tricorder, which you see right here. I love this thing. And he also has his pad, so he can write all of his captain's logs and play Tetris while he poops in the Starfleet bathrooms that we know they have somewhere on that bridge. We also get a Type 1 hand phaser. This is, I think they called it the cricket phaser. It's a very small phaser, and this is what the original Picard came with also. Never liked it then, still don't really like it now, but it looks good. I always just liked everybody having the normal phaser. But that's fine, they gave him that little one too. And his last accessory is his personal view screen, that little monitor that we always see in Picard's ready room. So, and this time it's black, which is a different color from the original one. Speaking of, let's talk about some original figures. Let's do some comparisons now, and I guess it makes sense to start with Captain Picard. Now, to be fair, they did do later on a Season 1 style Picard in a different outfit. I don't happen to have the one here with me today. What I do have is the very first Picard figure that Playmates did. And you can see it's pretty darn different. So the first thing you notice off the bat is that the outfit is very different. Now, like I said, they did do a version of him in the Season 1 colors much later on in the series. I don't have it. This is like what you'd see him wear in the episode Darmok. But I'd say both likenesses are pretty good. Like, I'm not wearing nostalgia glasses here when I say I like these old Trek figures a lot. And I still do. I mean, is one sculpt better than the other? I feel like that's more subjective than I want to say. I'm actually surprised. I'm like almost fighting my urge to say which one's better, which one's worse. But to be fair, the one that's newer here on the left, it's definitely a much more sophisticated head sculpt. I mean, these Playmates ones from the 90s, they were a lot more cartoony and kid-friendly. They know adults are buying it, so they're making these new ones more realistic. So, I personally like the charm and personality of the old vintage ones. But, okay, I'm not going to lie, the new ones are really, really great and much more realistic. So, it's subjective, whichever one you like more. They're both good, they both make me happy. But let's talk accessories, because I did mention the monitor. Well, here we go. We have one monitor over here, one monitor over here. They're pretty much the same. They are almost the same, except that the older one came with a decal. And that's one thing I'm noticing that the newer toys aren't doing. They're not including decals in any accessories. So, weird little thing. Although I should mention, because I didn't do that yet, they both do pop out. So you can actually remove the monitor from the base, and boom, there you go. Let's compare these Type 1 phasers also, these little crickets here. The newer one is on the left, older one is on the right. Yeah, it's basically identical. It might even be the exact same mold. Yeah, it very well might be. And as far as the pad goes, yeah, I'm going to say this is the identical mold. Again, the difference is there's a decal here that the new one doesn't have.
I like the decal a lot. I wish the new ones had these, but they're not doing that yet. So maybe that's something they'll add in the future or paint. I don't know, but just worth noting there. Now, what about our Data and our Rikers? Well, again, you guys can see that Data is pretty much very similar. Riker is different because that very first release of Riker had him all battle damage and he has this like weird pose. That's a whole other thing. And if you guys actually want to hear more about this original line and why he's posed this way, I interviewed both Scott Henze and Steve Varner on my Trek Untold podcast. So check those out if you want to hear a whole lot of stories about the making of these toys. But you know, we're going to really focus more, I guess, on the sculpt especially because they did release another Riker later on in Season 1 colors. But just for the sake of argument here, you know, we'll talk head sculpts. Again, just like what I said about Picard, it's pretty subjective. I do think they did a really great job back then with the Data and also with Frakes too. You know, with the William Riker, they both look really good to me. They're definitely a lot chunkier than the modern figures, and they're a little bit shorter too, you guys can notice. And, you know, if actually, they're not on the same even line of alignment, but, you know, if I actually put them on the same line, you'll see the new ones are slightly bigger. So just for the sake of keeping everybody on screen, I'm moving them behind the old one. But yeah, for the most part, it appears like a lot of the accessories that we're seeing that were packaged with those original ones are pretty much the identical ones, you know, that we're using now. Like here on my left is that original light source, and over here on the right is the new one. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. Maybe they 3D scanned it, I don't quite know, but it's identical. And I'm not gonna even look at every single accessory because I can just already tell, like they're the exact same thing. But hey, there's nothing wrong with going with what works because it definitely does. Why sculpt it again? We already have it. I mean, really, truly, that is a toy thing. You know, if you're a toy maker, you gotta save time. So there you go. You already made the sculpt once, why do it again? So I'm gonna beam these figures out of the way and I'll give you guys my final thoughts about this series. Now, I don't want to keep bringing this up, but those Discovery figures, you know, they were all right, but they just were missing something. And I do really feel bad for them because it's like, you know, I'm saying all these bad things about Burnham and about Saru. Well, it's even funnier that now, of course, Burnham would fall right over. But, you know, I'm saying all these bad things about them, but I'm just going to bring them in here just to do one last comparison, just to show you how they look with them. You know, sculpts are good. They look good. It's just a few things I didn't like about them. I feel like I have come to like them a little bit more since that review I did, but, you know, then I look at things like accessories and stuff like that, and you know, they really just didn't get the same amount of care that the TNG and the Wrath of Khan figures did. And these TNG ones are really great. This is a great line. You know, I really liked what they did with the Wrath of Khan ones also, so if you haven't watched that review yet either, go ahead and check that one out. But these TNG ones are absolutely a labor of love, and I can see that love in there. I can see that dedication to the work, that kind of combination of bringing back nostalgia, but also taking these toys into modern times. And it's working. They're doing a much better job than I originally thought. Because, you know, again, I talked about that price point being an issue of why I had a problem with those disco figures, because I had wrong information. But, you know, at $12, $13, $14 with tax, whatever it's going to be, these are great deals. These are wonderful. You know, you're getting that exact hit of nostalgia. You're getting all those accessories, which is a lot. You're getting pretty good articulation, too, and decent likenesses at this scale. Yeah, I'm going to say these are worth getting. If you're a Star Trek fan, it is time to make a little bit of upgrade. I'm never going to say one is better than the other completely, because there's always going to be a special place in my heart for those 90s Playmate vintage toys, and I still buy them to this day. I love those toys. Will I love these new ones just as much? Time will tell. But they're doing a lot of good stuff here, and I'm definitely going to keep a much closer eye on them as time goes on. Now, there's also word of some more playsets coming out, so I would love to get a bridge with these guys, or maybe some vehicles like a proper shuttlecraft that could fit them. There's a lot of possibilities now, and I'm definitely curious to see what they're going to do next. More so because they haven't actually announced anybody beyond these initial 8 figures, so what happens after this, I don't know. I just really hope that there are plans to keep this thing going and make it go a lot more aggressively. But overall, these are definitely a hit and not a miss. If you like these figures and want to pick them up for yourself, go ahead and check out my Amazon affiliate links in the description below. If you click on those links and buy anything, you'll be directly supporting this YouTube channel at no extra cost to you. So we're going to have links for these and all the Star Trek toys you've been looking at, so make sure you check out all those reviews and see if you want these, which, by the way, spoiler alert, you do. So that's our look at the Star Trek The Next Generation action figures from Playmates, the revival of the Star Trek Playmates line. And you know what? It started off a little weak, but it definitely got strong, and we got a really good finish here. So stay tuned for more Star Trek stuff. Make sure you check out my Trek Untold podcast every Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts, and every Sunday here on video form on this channel. So until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Nerd News Today, and until next time, live long and buy toys.